My name is Ian O'Donnell, and I'm the Professor of Criminology in UCD. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our postgraduate programs in criminology and criminal justice. And if there's anything that I don't cover in my remarks now, I'll be available afterwards when I'll be in one of the booths. You can come and chat, or you can always email if you have any follow-up questions, or if something occurs to you tomorrow that you'd wish you'd asked today. There's no problem. You can email us, lawpostgraduate@ucd.ie. We do what we can to answer any questions that you might have. And we have a time for Q&A at the end of the session. So if you want to put questions into the chat box, feel free to do that. And we do our best to get through as many of them as possible. And if there are any outstanding ones, we can pick them up afterwards. So what do I want to do with you for 10 minutes or so? And I'll keep my remarks fairly brief. I want to say something about postgraduate study in criminology and criminal justice in the UCD School of Law. And I'm going to say a little bit about who applies for our programs, what they study. So I'll talk to you about some of the courses that we offer and where people go afterwards. And then I'm going to finish up with a quotation from a saint. So that'll wrap us up, and then we'll have our Q&A. Criminology is sometimes described as a rendezvous discipline, and I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. It's a place where people come together from a variety of backgrounds to discuss ideas and to test those ideas and develop new ways of understanding and so on. And in our master's program in UCD, we get people from law backgrounds and they enroll for the LLM, and we get people from a whole variety of other disciplinary backgrounds: English, media studies, history, economics, sociology, psychology, you name it, and they enroll for the MSc. Some people come directly from their undergraduate studies. So we have some people who've completed a 3 or 4 year program. In universities all over the country, people come from Trinity. Some UCD graduates stay with us. They come from everywhere and abroad. Some come directly from undergrad, and some come from the workplace. So the chairman of the parole board was one of our students a few years ago. Members of An Garda Síochána have been on the program, Department of Justice officials, members of staff of the prison service, and so on. And in the last few years, a number of people who have served prison sentences themselves, and they've done their degrees in custody, and they've come out and they've joined our master's program, admitted on merit, just like everybody else. So we've a terrific mix in the class. It's the biggest criminology and criminal justice program at postgrad level in the country. This year we have 40 students. That's a bit of a bumper year now. People start in September, or you can start in January if that works better for you. You can do the course full-time, you can do it part-time. There's a great deal of flexibility. So between January and September starts, at the moment, we have 40 on the program. And it's a really international group. So I said people come from universities all over the country, and they also join us from universities in countries all over the world. One of the seminars that I ran last year, I had students from France, Germany, Belgium, Romania, Greece, and a variety of different US states, as well as from Ireland. What everybody has in common is a record of high achievement. They've got onto the course and the promise of more to come. So a really good mix of people on the course. And what will you study? Well, there's a lot of variety on offer. Some of the popular modules in the law school, I just want to say a little bit about, and you do most of your work in the law school, but you can pick modules from other schools too, and I'll say a little bit about that in a moment or two. So one of our popular courses is on victims, and this is taught by my colleague Deirdre Healy, who's the director of the UCD Institute of Criminology and Criminal Justice. So as well as a teaching program, we have a research institute in criminology and criminal justice. And Dr. Healy teaches a course on victims. And if you have any interest in this area, you'll be aware of the fact that the victim has become much more central to discussions about crime and punishment in recent years. And a lot of initiatives have come on stream to help victims negotiate the process. Sometimes these are driven by European directives of one kind or another. Sometimes they're homegrown. And there's been a corresponding rise in the number of studies that investigate the nature of victimization, its prevalence, its various impacts, and how to remedy the experience of victimization. So we have a module that explores what we know about victims and victimization, with an emphasis on the emerging role of the victim. And like all of our modules, the focus is comparative, and then we use the comparative experience as a lens through which we can get a better understanding of what's going on in this country. We have a course on advanced criminological theory. So for those of you who are interested in the concepts behind criminology, you can think about and read about biological explanations of crime, or sociological or psychological ones. And this course has an emphasis on, classical thinking in criminology, and more recent theories, and looks at the origins of these ideas, how they've evolved over time, their impact on policy decisions, practical applications, legislation, interventions, and so on. Another module, and this is one that I teach myself, is called Crime and Society. And what this is about is, in lots of countries in the developed world in recent years, there's been a heightened awareness of crime and victimization and their consequences. And we all take account of victimization risk when we're going about our business on a daily basis. And governments respond to perceived increases in crime in predictable ways, often with repressive legislation. So if you're following the debate about knife crime at the moment, what's the government talking of doing? Well, doubling the sentences for possession of a knife from 5 years to 10 years, as if this increased deterrent effect will in some way magically resolve the problem. So this module looks at how do governments respond through this kind of repressive legislation, and what are the impacts of these kinds of initiatives. It looks at how confidence in rehabilitation has tended to wane across the world. People have lost faith in the capacity of punishment to reform. How expertise has been sidelined, and there's an increasing emphasis on performance management and measurement and the metrics associated with criminal justice. But all of those developments which are prevalent don't necessarily reflect increases in crime. And the trend in many countries across Europe, the US, and so on in recent years is for levels of serious crime to fall. So this module is to try and make sense of, why is it when levels of crime have fallen, public fears have escalated, and governments have responded in the ways that I've outlined. And again, the emphasis is on looking at Ireland in a comparative context. Now, we have very poor crime statistics and very little data and empirical research in criminal justice generally. So it's difficult to talk with confidence about crime trends in Ireland when we can't trust the data sources. And again, that's a theme that's picked up in this module. Other options in the School of Law, I'm just giving you a kind of a sampler here. White collar crime. So again, topical. If you're looking at the newspapers today, you'll see that one of the men who was sentenced to 6 years for his role in the Anglo-Irish Bank affairs all those years ago that brought the economy to its knees has been released today. And that's front page news in a lot of the papers. So people are interested in white collar and corporate crime. We have a course on that. Punishment, prisons and public policy. This is another one that I teach. What's the role of the prison in society? How has it changed? What can we expect of the prison in terms of its impact on crime rates, etc. Coercive confinement. So this is a course about how to think more generally about the wide network of institutions where people were confined against their will. This is a course with a strong historical dimension. You'll be aware of the report of the inquiry into mother and baby homes that was published in the last couple of weeks. And there have been many similar inquiries into industrial and reformatory schools, into Magdalen laundries and so on. And Ireland is really interesting because in the 1950s and 1960s, the prison population was very, very small, no more than 360 or 370 people. But there were another 30,000 locked up in laundries, industrial schools, reformatory schools, psychiatric hospitals where they were involuntarily detained and so on. So we have a module that tries to make sense of these unusual trends. We have a module on the law of armed conflict, on desistance and rehabilitation, why people stop offending, and on international human rights. So you have a big range to choose from within the School of Law. And then if you're interested, you can go outside of the School of Law too. So There's a popular module in the School of Sociology, which Dr. Egon Mulcahy teaches, called Policing and Social Conflict. And that's about the historical development of the police, the role of policing in wider society, how it relates to different debates about, diversity and cultural change and so on, the intersection of policing with various kinds of social conflict, the role of the police in a divided society. So there's an emphasis in this module on Northern Ireland, and Dr. Mulcahy, who teaches it, has written a kind of authoritative text on policing in Northern Ireland. And it looks at private security and developments in that area and processes of globalization. So once again, what can we understand about wider trends by looking at the situation in Ireland, and what can wider trends bring to our understanding of domestic developments? The School of Social Policy, Social Work and Social Justice, Dr. Sarah Morton, offers a course in drug use, community and society, and quite a few of our students take that module. And if you're interested in crime, you'll be aware of the relationship between substance misuse and crime, and you may be curious about the different interventions that can be used to alleviate the problems caused by alcohol and drug misuse. This course looks at substance use from the perspective of the family and the community, with a particular focus on interventions and which ones might be effective, and the relationship between drug and alcohol use and domestic violence, a particular problem, I think, during the lockdown that we're all experiencing at the moment, where if there's a conflictual domestic situation and it's fueled by alcohol, the chances are that that's exacerbated by the situation we find ourselves in. And then you might wonder about public policy choices, where the priority is to keep off licenses open at all costs, despite the predictable harms that are caused to people who find themselves in these conflictual domestic environments. So this is a course that looks at the development of responses to drug misuse in Ireland, and again against a backdrop of what do we know about what works in other jurisdictions. So legalization of drugs, for example, or depenalization, or thinking about drug use from a medical rather than a criminal justice perspective. So if you take this, if you join us on this program, you'll do 6 modules, and they're 10 credits each, and you'll probably do 3 if you're full-time. You can, part-time is slightly different. If you take the course on a full-time basis, you'll probably do 3 modules in the first semester and 3 in the second. Sometimes people do 4 and 2, it suits them, or 2 and 4. And then you'll do a 30-credit dissertation. And this is an opportunity for you to spend an extended period of time producing a piece of work of about 15,000 words on a subject of your choice that you think about and develop with an advisor who will be allocated from among the School of Law staff. So every member of staff is allocated 2 or 3 students, and they support them in an advisory capacity. And we've just, in the last week or so, allocated the dissertation advisors for the current academic year. And I've just collated a list of the topics that people are exploring to give you a sense of the wide range of coverage. We have one student who's looking at procedural fairness and equality in treatment of complainants of rape at trial. Somebody else is looking at how to mitigate the impact of violent extremist propaganda on social media platforms. So about kind of radicalization of people via social media. Another is going to look at supporting vulnerable victims of intimate partner abuse. And this is going to be a comparative study, Ireland versus elsewhere. We have another student who's proposing to look at the impact of the possession of non-lethal or lethal weapons on frontline policing. So we have an unarmed police force, or we applaud ourselves for having an unarmed police force, but some estimates are that up to a quarter of guards are licensed to carry firearms. All detectives do, members of special units and so on do. And there's a question mark about what is the impact of the possession of firearms on the nature of policing. Should more Gardaí have access to firearms? Do they want such access? What about other non-lethal weapons instead? We have somebody who's going to look at child murderers in the UK Ireland and Norway to look at the different penal response to children who kill other children. Somebody's going to look at the gap between theory and practice in restorative justice. So there's a huge interest at the moment in restorative justice, one variety of which is bringing offenders and victims together to try to come to a solution to the problem that crime has caused in their lives. And we've somebody else proposing to look at the incarceration of women. So we have very few, most countries have incarcerated very few women. There wouldn't be a country on the planet that has more than 7 or 8% of its prison population being female. So this student is proposing to look at women in prison and whatever particular issues they might raise. Where might you end up? I have a few comments to say about where our students tend to go, and then I'll wrap up and deal with any questions that are in the Q&A box. Previous students have become, one of our students is a judge, circuit court judge. He was a solicitor when he came onto the course. He's a judge now. Others have joined the Department of Justice. A good number have joined the Guards, and a number of years ago, 5 or 6 out of one cohort joined the Guards. There had been a recruitment embargo for a number of years, and when recruitment recommenced, a large number of people in the class joined the Guards. We've people who joined the Irish Prison Service. Others go join the legal profession. They become barristers and solicitors. They do the masters for a year, and then they go to the King's Inns or the Law Society or what have you. Some have become policy or research staff in non-governmental organisations. There are few enough opportunities here, but there are some. And some continue their studies to PhD level. So they may stay on with us and enter the doctoral programme, which is another 4 years, or they may go somewhere else and enrol on a doctoral programme there. And I think it's probably fair to say that it's not a vocational training course. So if you do the postgraduate programme in criminology and criminal justice, there isn't an obvious pathway to a particular career. But the skills and the knowledge and the habits of thought and so on that you'll develop over the year, I think will position you to make an impact whatever direction your career might take. And I said I was going to quote from a saint. And who am I going to quote from? John Henry Newman, who set up this university where I work and where hopefully many of you will enroll. And he was born 220 years ago next week. So there you go. So there's always some relevance, and canonized a year or so ago. And he wrote, of course, about the idea of a university. And I just want to read you a paragraph or a sentence or two from what Newman wrote about the idea of the university. Now, he was the first rector of the Catholic University of Ireland, set up in 1854, and that became the Royal University and then UCD, and so on. And here's what Newman wrote about the idea of a university. If then a practical end must be assigned to a university course, I say it is that of training good members of society. It is the education which gives a man, rather gender specific, I suppose, writing in those days would be a little bit more general today, a clear conscious view of their own opinions and judgments, a truth in developing them, an eloquence in expressing them, and a force in urging them. It teaches him to see things as they are, to go right to the point, to disentangle a skein of thought, to detect what is sophistical, and to discard what is irrelevant. So this is Newman's vision of education in the fullest, kind of roundest sense, involving the formation of the whole person, not just their educational training and not their preparation for a particular kind of career. And that's one of the ambitions that we have for our criminology program, that it would equip you to cut away and discard the fake news, is the term we'd use for the sophistical reasoning that Newman was talking about all those years ago. So that's all I've got to say. And Una's going to come in now and she'll have some Q&A. And as I say, if you don't get a chance, if we're cut off, we've another 5 minutes or so in this part of the afternoon. If you don't get a chance to ask a question now, you can pop it in by email afterwards. It's no problem at all. Or you can come into the booth and we can talk there. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thanks, that was really interesting. I'm sure everybody agreed. Yeah, we have a few questions, and keep them coming if you've any questions for Ian here. They're kind of practical questions. The first one is about can you apply before you have received your undergraduate results?
Yeah, definitely. Of course you can. Absolutely. Yeah. And you might get a kind of an offer conditional on achieving a certain level in your undergraduate degree. So that's not a problem.
Okay. And then a question about how competitive it is to be accepted on the course.
Yeah, it is competitive to be accepted on the course, and if you get a 2-1 in your undergraduate degree, you'll have a very good chance of being offered a place. And if you're invited to make a personal statement with your application, I'd really encourage you to give a little bit of thought to that. It's only, a page or so, but really to set out clearly in that personal statement why you think that this is the best course for you, and what you might bring to it and so on. So yes, it is competitive, but if you get a 2-1, the chances of being made an offer are very good.
Great, thanks, Ian. Then there's a question about somebody not coming from, will it affect them that they haven't come from a law background?
Yeah, no, it won't affect you at all. So if you have a law degree, you'll graduate with an LLM. If you don't have a law degree, and we have students who've done everything, English and history, economics, psychology, sociology, media studies, you name it, we've had them. You graduate with the MSc. The only slight difference would be that somebody who had a law degree might be able to pick some options that somebody without a law degree might not take. Now, this seldom is an issue because most people pick from the list of criminology courses. They pick 6 modules in criminology and criminal justice, whether they're doing the LLM or the MSc, but you can do 1 or 2 modules from outside of that list. So there might be somebody who's doing the LLM in criminology and criminal justice, and they have a real interest in intellectual property law. And they think, well, they'd like to do a module in that area too. And somebody with a non-law background wouldn't be able to make that choice. So if you don't have a law degree, please apply. There's no problem at all. And to all intents and purposes, whether people come in with a law degree or not, they tend to pick the criminology and criminal justice modules that we have available to them. But the lawyers, from time to time, have a particular interest in a legal area, and they might choose a module from that list which wouldn't be open to somebody who is coming from a background that didn't involve law.
Great, thanks, Ian. And then there's a question about the dissertation. Somebody's wondering, is it continuous throughout the 2 semesters?
Now, the way that the dissertation works is we ask you, so the course starts in September and it runs for 12 months pretty much. It finishes when you submit the dissertation the following July or August. You can start thinking about, the earlier you start thinking about the dissertation, the better. But what we do is very early on in the 2nd semester, so at the very start of the 2nd semester, we ask people to come up with a title and 300 words on what it is they propose to look at. And we allocate them an advisor. And then they meet with that advisor and they come to some kind of clarity about what it is they want to do. And then they work on that from kind of January, from about now to the submission date in July or so. Some people have a really clear idea when they start what they want to do, and they might start doing a little bit of reading before Christmas. But most people, we start the process in January, because if we left it until the end of the 2nd semester, it'd be May. And then it's getting a little bit late and people start to panic and they're trying to do things over the summer. And sometimes people want to do an empirical project and they need ethical approval for that. And there's a process that you need to go through. So we start that going in early January.
Great, thanks, Ian. We've one final question here, is in relation to academic reference. Do we ask for, or is it absolutely essential that someone has an academic reference?
Yeah, what I'd say about academic references is it's always helpful to have a lecturer or somebody in your institution who will provide a reference for you, and you're going to be asked for their contact details. So if you don't have somebody, and this is a really good time to start thinking about that. In UCD, we allocate students to an advisor in first year. That person provides the reference for them. So I'd really encourage you, whatever institution you're at, if there's a member of staff, if you're thinking about postgraduate study, you're going to have an academic referee or 2, no matter where you apply. And it's very, very helpful for that academic to know a little bit about you before they write the reference. So if I'm asked for a reference, usually the first question is, in what capacity do you know the applicant and how well? So I'd really encourage you, now you don't have to call to the lecturer every day and leave boxes of chocolates at their door and bombard them with phone calls, but identify somebody who might write a reference for you and give them an opportunity to get to know you a little bit, so that when you're giving their details, you know that they're happy enough with that and that they can write a rounded assessment of you. So I'd really encourage you to do that regardless of where it is you intend to apply.
Great, thank you, Ian. I'm just looking at the time here because I know this will shut down at half two because there are a lot of other talks on today. So I would encourage anybody with any questions either to come to the booth now, where Ian and I will both be there to answer your questions, or at any stage if you've questions over the next month or two, please go to our website or email us on lawpostgraduate@ucd.ie, or the website, which is ucd.ie/law, and there's lots of information there. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you in the foreseeable future in UCD Sutherland School of Law.